Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Sir? Great.
Evening.
Sir,
and history with the debates over history and politics going on at the time in England and France. So, in other words, James was very much influenced by historians of the French Revolution when he wrote The Black Jacobins. This is the Elizabeth Glasgow.
Caribbean history and DNA. Caribbean history and DNA. In 1492 CE, Christopher Columbus sailed across the Atlantic and landed in the Americas. He and his men were the first to wash up in the Bahamas, Hispaniola, Dominican Republic, and Haiti, and eastern Cuba.
From Europe.
From Europe.
They weren't the first
to do so, but they weren't the first to wash up there. Not the first. But however, on their return to Spain, he and his brother Bartholomew later returned to the Americas and identified Hispaniola's land and indigenous people as potentially profitable for the Spanish crown. Bartholomew estimated about 1.1 million people lived on Hispaniola, but modern scholars have generally used the range of 250,000 to 1 million people. However, the actual Caribbean Aboriginal population is now known based on a new Caribbean DNA study published in the journal Nature, which fuses decades of archaeological work with cutting-edge genetic technology. And this breakthrough study shows that the local population before the arrival of the Spanish was much lower and far less heterogeneous than thought. That is from critical thinking. Caribbean DNA study challenges Spanish assumptions. Professor David Reich of the Harvard Medical School led a team of researchers who analyzed the genomes of 263 individuals, representing the largest ever study of ancient human DNA in the Americas. The Caribbean DNA study concluded that the Caribbean had been settled by two major migratory waves of highly mobile people separated by thousands of years. However, according to an article by the Florida Museum of Natural History, on their way to this conclusion, the researchers developed a new genetic technique for estimating the island's past population size prior to the first Spanish landings. This is quite important. Now, when the first Europeans arrived, the number of people living in the Caribbean was far smaller than 1.1 million, reported by Columbus's brother Bartholomew. Professor of Archaeology William Keegan from the Florida's Museum of Natural History was co-senior author of the new study, and he told the New York Times that this study of ancient DNA moves the academic understanding of the Caribbean's history forward dramatically. In one fell swoop. Two ancient waves of Caribbean DNA. The new genetic evidence offers insights into the early people of the Caribbean and suggests that the island's first inhabitants were a group of stone tool users who had boated to Cuba about 6,000 years ago. Now, these first inhabitants expanded eastward and populated other smaller islands during the region's archaic age. The study determined that they had closer genetic links with people from Central and South America compared to the ancient DNA from North American Indian cultures, and further cementing this origins story. Now, artifacts found in Belize and Cuba also suggest they had a Central American origin. The second ancient pathway into the Caribbean was forged 2,500 to 3,000 years ago by groups of migrating farmers. The paper says these people were related to the Arawak speakers of Northeast or South America, who had paddled the fingers of South America's Orinoco River basin from the interior to coastal Venezuela, then northwards into the Caribbean Sea. After settling on Puerto Rico, These explorers traveled westward, beginning the region's ceramic age, which is defined by these farmers' agricultural methods and style of pottery. Now, the New Caribbean DNA study also relied on ceramic evidence. Before this new study was published, there had always been unclarity regarding the various styles of pottery discovered in the Caribbean, each of which was associated with later migration waves. However, the newly gained genetic information finally determines that all the fragments of ancient pottery found in the region were created by one group of people over time. Another aspect of the study analyzed the X chromosomes from 19 pairs of genetic cousins who had all lived on different islands but were separated by several generations. For example, the DNA from a man buried in the Bahamas was matched with another man discovered 600 miles away in the Dominican Republic, according to the paper. Dr. Reich wrote that there's such a finding. By the way, I'm gonna pause right there to suggest this. It is not difficult. They didn't have the ease of mobility. They never had the ease of mobility. The people in the islands at the time, these people, they never had the ease of mobility. So yes, you can find that one man was related to another person 600 years, but it shows how the travel was active, and I said that in the last class. The people of the Caribbean, they were actively traveling. And many of these, and they washed up on the islands. These, and by the way, the narrative begins by saying that Christopher Columbus were the first people to have washed up on the islands. But then later on talk about other people mobile people who were washed up on the island, who came, and mobile farmers who came and traveled all along the island. So that's a contradiction right there, okay? But it is quite interesting as we talk about the importance of rethinking our heritage and studying our heritage and our roots and questioning whether or not we have misunderstood our heritage. And we're having here, and now we're hearing that what we thought about the Spanish DNA is completely different. Now new studies researchers are finding some different evidence that's suggesting something different and something new as it relates to how the people of the Caribbean were closely connected, although they were separate. But they were very diverse and mixed, and there was lots of intermingling that has always defined the Caribbean. What you guys thought about? Did you guys listen to the video?
I did.
Yes, sir. We listened.
You guys heard it? I mean, was it working? Was the volume okay?
Yes,
Yeah.
sir. For me.
Okay, that's that particular short was just talking about an introduction to looking at what pertains to the Caribbean, what happened to the Caribbean before the coming of the Europeans, because I believe that it's very important that we actually explore what happened to the other people of the Caribbean, the Taino people. So that is really a brief synopsis of some of what happened with the Taino people. We're not going to get into what happened with the Taino. We won't get into our Arawak community, but as we begin to trace Caribbean history, of course we begin with the coming of the Europeans. Who the Africans weren't here in the Caribbean, but one of the things that I noted in the video, was that while doing research, was that a lot of the people in the Caribbean, people aren't sure what happened in the Caribbean, but what we know is that it was active, bursting with life and activity, and people would travel along the coast. That's one of the things that we noticed. But not only that, the archaeologists and there are people who are saying that from that from as far it would suggest that people from other parts of the universe, other parts of the world, from Africa, from Egypt, may have found themselves in the Caribbean. And new findings are suggesting that. But that's one of the things that we're going to contend in this class as we start to delve into the history of the Taino people. I didn't mean to play that video, but I decided to introduce it quickly. I was trying to find the other video with C.L.R, but I said I probably should play that for you guys so that you have a background story as to what's going on in the Caribbean. Let me go back to the PowerPoint presentation. I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint presentation because what I did is for you guys, I did a timeline of the Caribbean. So if you look at the timeline, tracing Caribbean history, it's called Tracing Caribbean History, 1492 to 1490, between 1492 and 1494, Columbus discovered or came to the Caribbean. Of course, he thought that he was in East India, but they found themselves in the West Indies. Of course, part of the motive or the ulterior motive of coming to the Caribbean was for gold, was for profit, to satisfy greed, international competition between European countries and the nobles or the dominant class at the time. And from that, it takes us into the slave trade, sugar plantation society, heroes and maroons, abolition and riots, loss, freedom and independence, servitude and indentured labor and China, the coming of the Jews, black work for wages. So part of the thing that we'll do in this class, we will trace the Caribbean, we will present an outline of the Caribbean. And of course, I comment on each of the occurrences, starting in 1492. But of course, we have to start before that. What happened before 1492? Of course, the Taino people lived here, and the Taino people were actively traveling along the Americans. There was lots of travel that defined the Americans. We said that one of the things that about immigration is that the world is about people traveling for opportunity, and if you follow the migratory patterns of the American Indians and the Arawaks and the Taino people, what you find is that depending on the seasons, depending on what pertains, the idea of nationhood was it important to the Taino people. When we talk about the Taino people or what exists before the Europeans came to the Caribbean, in fact, when you start to study civilizations, hopefully I am recording. I believe I am. When you start to study civilizations and see what pertains in terms of the Europeans believed in nationhood, nation states, and the idea of fencing and theft is also synonymous with the idea of colonial fencing. Now, the people in the European society was a society that practiced the idea of nationhood. And when we start to read Eli Kaduri in the book Nationalism is a doctrine that was invented in Europe at the beginning of the 19th century. Nationalism is a doctrine invented in Europe in the beginning of the 19th century. And when we talk about nationalism promoted the idea of free and independent peoples, states, nations, devoid of control or colonialism. Yet it was this, yet it was what defined. We talk about nationalism promoting the idea of free and independent peoples and states, nations devoid of control or colonialism. It promotes the idea of national rights and state sovereignty, territorial integrity. But it was a term that was synonymous with Europeans. But it wasn't a term that characterized the Amerindians or the Taino people. They were known as peoples. And that weren't, and they were said to be nomads, in the sense nomads people who move from place to place. That's the society of the indigenous population. When you the indigenous people, that's what, when you start to study Caribbean life and Caribbean society before the European influence, and you start to study the people that lives there, it's the Amerindians, the Taino people. And they did not have any idea of nationhood the way we think about it today, because for the people of the Caribbean in the 1960s, the 1950s, 70s, we were looking for free, independent states. But of course, what happened in the Caribbean before the European was that their idea of the idea of freedom wasn't an idea of nationhood. It was more so a people. And I say to you, when you the Africans did not think of themselves as black people, in a sense, they didn't think of themselves as any race. The idea of race became prevalent in the 1500s or the 1600s, just as they are about to embark on the slave trade or the transatlantic movement. Race was a theory that was invented, that existed before the 1500s, but was on the back shelf of academia. Nobody thought that it was serious until it became necessary to justify a practice of enslavement. But the idea of nationhood, the idea of sovereign states, of statehood, did not exist in the Caribbean among the Taino people. There were people that traveled from place to place. And that was their economic activity. So as the weather changed, so did they move. They move upstream or downstream, or they may move, or altogether to a different state. But it's quite interesting when you start to study immigration and travel and so on. Travel is not a new thing. The idea of people travel, the idea of travel, the idea of mobility, and the thing is, it was something that when the video I just played suggests that there was an active and a busy movement among the Americas. And in fact, not just the Americas, but people moving from place to place is something that has been occurring for years. And it's hard to think that people would cross the Atlantic Ocean. But if the Europeans could do it in their ships, there are people who would brave the transatlantic and would travel across the seas. And so it is not far-fetched to see, because and one of the things that we're going to talk about when you start to study Arawakan artifacts, or the artifacts of the Arawakan people, and how it is closely related to some of the slaves who came here, it's quite interesting to see the similarity in the history. But that's quite important to note when you start to trace Caribbean history, and you begin by looking at what pertains previous. There's another video I would like you to watch as it relates to Caribbean identity and Caribbean history, but that is not for this class, it's for class on Friday. But what I wanted to talk about today, and I know Adrian wanted me to play the video about C.L.R. James, which I guess I could play. In fact, let me see if I could find that video to acquiesce to Adrian, because there's another video I want to talk about the idea of the subaltern and what we're talking about. So give me a second, let me find it.
Sir, if you're talking, your mic is muted.
Ah, mm, mm, mm. I was speaking the entire time. I was speaking the entire time.
But sir, I thought you were going to look for the video and
Yeah, but
decide.
before I showed the video, I was sharing from this. I was
Oh,
talking the entire time. So you guys didn't know what was going on?
no, sir. You have to go back.
No, sir, we thought you were looking for the video.
No, I was talking the
I
entire
was
time, talking about this and then moving down.
I was waiting on the
Talking.
video,
I was
sir.
speaking the entire time. I was speaking and I spoke a lot. Okay. I spoke a lot. Um, okay. Okay, forget it. And then it wasn't even recorded because it's muted. Yeah, I was speaking, but because I'm sharing my screen, I cannot see I can't see if I'm muted or not unless you tell me. Um uh but I had shared that you saw me sharing this? You saw what's on my screen?
Yeah, we saw that and we saw you scrolling though, but I
Yeah,
thought you were
yeah.
trying to find something.
Oh no, I was talking from it. Um I was speaking from this particular resource here. That's fine. I don't think I have time. We will do that later on next week. Okay, we will let me stop share and I'm going to share now. And I was about to stop sharing and now share the video because I was giving a background to it and everything, but forget it. Let's share the video I had in question to play for you guys.
C.L.R. James' book, The Black Jacobins, is a powerful and definitive history of one of the most important but under-recognized events in history, the slave revolution that took place in Haiti from 1791 until 1803.
Are you guys hearing?
Yes, sir.
Good, good, good.
The book is important not only as a historical account of the event, but as one of the very first examples of history told from the point of view of the oppressed population, in this case, the slaves of the island. James was a politically engaged.
Very important point. Very important point. It's told from the subaltern, with a subaltern view. It's told from the perspective of those who are affected by the very history. That is very important.
Sir,
And
can I go back to that important point, please, sir? Thank
yeah,
you.
okay, yes, I will. The subaltern view, very important. And then, so that it's very important. I'm going to play this video and another one, and then we may not have time to. I'm going to wrap up class. I won't have time, and then next week Wednesday I'll do what I was going to do because I want to talk about post-colonial theory, and this class, Caribbean thought, comes under post-colonial theory. Okay, very important. There's a reason why I'm saying that. Post-colonial theory is a body of thought that aims to do something, but what? Okay. Anyways, now we will go back to listening to this.
Sir, before you move on, I just want to make sure I'm clear. We are looking at the work from C.L.R. James,
Yes.
this book, and so we're going to look at just an account of the Asian Revolution. That's what we're looking at now, right?
Well, he talks about the Haitian Revolution, but not necessarily the Haitian Revolution.
All right,
But,
all right. At least
yeah,
I just
yeah,
want to put into perspective what this
yes.
is capturing. All right, thank you, sir.
But yeah, but not just about the Haitian Revolution, but it is the idea behind the Haitian Revolution.
Okay.
And
Okay.
and that's what I want to hone in on. Why is it or how they were successful and who is telling the story? The Black Jacobins is revolutionary because it was amongst the first couple of books that that black people or post-colonial subjects or colonial subjects started to write. They started to tell their very own story. And when this book came out, at first it was on the back shelf. Books written by Fanon, Black Skins, White Mask in the 60s. C.L.R. James, the Black Jacobins. Though these books weren't popular. In fact, in some places in Jamaica, you won't get them because we are still influenced by European culture and the church. Okay, which is so anyways, but I want you guys, this is a very important book when you start to study post-colonial theory, otherwise known as Caribbean thought at Jamaica Theological Seminary, because this course you're doing, Caribbean thought, could be called post-colonial theory, okay, or Caribbean political theory. Same, it comes under post-colonialism. Post-colonialism, notice the word post-colonialism, or or examining post-independent life from a theoretical perspective, a philosophy of skepticism. Okay, so let's listen to this now.
Recognized events in history, the slave definitive history of one of the most important but under-recognized. C.L.R. James' book, The Black Jacobins, is a powerful and definitive history of one of the most important but under-recognized events in history, the slave revolution that took place in Haiti from 1791 until 1803. The book is important not only as a historical account of the event, but as one of the very first examples of history told from the point of view of the oppressed population, in this case the slaves of the island. James was a politically engaged journalist from Trinidad, and he spent considerable time in the book discussing the truly awful conditions of slavery in Saint-Domingue, as Haiti was then called. He looked at before the revolution and the remarkable leadership qualities of the slave turned revolutionary Toussaint Louverture. James' outlook in the book was very much influenced by Marxist philosophy, and this is what set the book apart from other accounts by other scholars of the Haitian Revolution.
And we're back in third quarter planning. Adams is quarterbacking this project.
James wrote,
Notice C.L.R. James was influenced by Marxist philosophy. Okay, that's one of the things that we would talk about: capitalism and communism. Yes, we would, and that it's very important to make that distinction. A lot of when we start to study Caribbean currents, Caribbean thinkers, C.L.R. James, Walter Rodney, Edward Seaga, Bob Marley, Maurice Bishop, or Stephanie Black, Caribbean feminism or femininity or feminism within the Caribbean and so on. One of the questions you will ask is, what is the socio-political theory that has come to influence many of these thinkers? Caribbean independent fighters and revolutionaries were said to be Marxist or socialist, but why? It's because most of the Western world was more capitalism. And so for them, the way out is to be anti-capitalism, to go against what European culture promoted as the status quo that has helped to create the position of the black man, the position of the Caribbean, the position of people in the global north, the global south, or ghettos and so on and so forth.
The revolt is the only successful slave revolt in history, and the odds it had to overcome is evidence of the magnitude of the interests that were involved. Beyond the bottom-up history, that is, history told from the perspective of the marginalized rather than those of the elite status or politically influential members of society, readers of the Black Jacobins will gain a greater understanding of the political dynamics of the late 18th century. Now, this includes not only the events in Saint-Domingue, but the influence of the revolutions that took place in both America and France, and the key role that slavery played in these politics. When you're looking at a book like The Black Jacobin, you will be able to gain a fuller appreciation of the truly barbaric practice and the nature of the economies that were built from that practice of slavery. Now, the book is a radical work, and so it will appeal to readers who lean towards revolutionary politics, but it is also a work that is very engaging to a wider audience. So let's look at the work in the context of how it was written. The book, The Black Jacobins, is an example of what is called history from below. Now, although the term itself denotes works of history told from the perspective of people of low social and economic status, it was only used by historians long after The Black Jacobins was published in 1938. James' book was one of several works that inspired.
Somebody have a question? Someone has a question?
Yes, sir. It's more of an observation.
Yes.
It appears that the Haitian Revolution paralleled the United States Revolution at the time with their independence from Britain. And while you were talking earlier, and I was listening to the previous video, I was wondering why the Americans were not sympathetic with the Haitian Revolution, because they were doing the same fight. But then again, I remember that in history,
Very good. Who is that
French,
talking?
Fabian, sir.
Very good. Yes, continue.
But then I remember from American history that
Yes.
the French were also behind the American Revolution from Britain. So they were
Yes.
helping to fund it and stuff like that. So then I realized that the Americans were very sympathetic towards the French. So they would
Yes.
have identified with Haiti and their revolution, especially on the basis of race. So I was just thinking along that line a while.
Well, you have done a very good job. That's part of the assessment and the evaluation. Of course, please remember, Canada was part of. Canada has, and probably Kenyatta can talk to you about Canada, which was part of North America. Did you remember that much of America was controlled by Europe? Part was to France and the Spanish. They were all colonizing other countries and peoples, especially Black and brown peoples. It was within their interest for these Black and brown for these colonies to remain as colonies, and for them, because it would then create a wave of protest. Please remember that prior to that, there is, and of course, many people believe that it helped to fuel and influence the American Revolution and other revolutions. Yes, Kenyatta. 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 Kenyatta, can you hear me? Okay, somebody else hand is up, but he's not public. Can you guys hear me?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
we can hear you.
Kenyatta has had his hand up. Well,
He
of course,
said his microphone is down, sir.
Oh, okay. We can't hear him. He'll have to send a text.
About to switch devices, so until that time.
All right, we'll continue to watch this. But of course, please remember that this is the introduction class. Okay, the first couple of classes, we are introducing yourself to some of the ideas, some of the very important themes, language. Say, for example, the idea subaltern is a very important term. When you study post-colonial theory or Caribbean thought, we are bound to read the Black Jacobins. We are bound to meet C.L.R. James. We are bound to meet Frantz Fanon and Homi Baba. We will meet those people, and many of them have been influenced by a particular theory or ideology, Marxism, feminism, or whatever the other ism is. Kenyatta, can you speak now?
Yes, sir. I was able to locate my earphones. Are
Yes,
you hearing me now?
I can.
So two things. I really apologize for being late for class. I had some training session that went way, way over time. The question I wanted to ask is, and it's really asking as it relates to the current state of Haiti and in extension some Caribbean countries. And it's
Yeah,
that based on the video that you were showing a while ago, the recording, it spoke about you were talking about the makeup of the different economic systems. So
yeah,
I am now led to ask the question if do you, from your expertise and studying the Caribbean for way longer than we have, do you believe that the the current state of Haiti is a, how could I look at it, is a long-term effect stemming from decisions made during the historical process throughout the Caribbean as it relates to Haiti?
well, can I tell you, I have done so many classes and forums on Haiti. That's the question needs 3 hours to answer. And we're still answering the question, and we're doing a petition now, and I'm working with the Lakou people to try to develop content learning and cutting edge education in Haiti. We're working with them and stuff, but Haiti is suffering from a history of external interference. We are going to have a special guest coming to the class talking about Haiti, and there are other and there's a petition that we have going asking you to sign that talks about Haiti. I don't want to get too much into Haiti because we are going to have a class where we really delve into Haiti. Haiti is a unique situation that's and and many Caribbean people are not aware of what's going on in Haiti. I remember some time ago, when the Haitians came to Jamaica in the 90s, Jamaicans were afraid, were not happy that the government was welcoming the Haitians, and I think that was hypocritical. But Haiti is a failed state for many reasons. As I said to you, one of the first reasons was that the issue of debt played a very important role why Haiti failed. And one of the questions, one of the class, I talk about the paradox Caribbean islands. What separates Haiti and Cuba? And I talk about the issue, fine, granted freedom versus taken freedom. Because Cuba is almost a failed state like that of Haiti. In fact, they have an embargo because they fail to operate within the mold of the US economic system. Okay, that's part of Cuba's problem. Part of Togo, part of Haiti's problem was that, please remember that Haiti is one of the only or few countries that took their black countries that had a revolution and they took back took their independence. Since okay, but they have not had any real stability except for in the soon after their independence. But they have been suffering from the issue of corruption, U.S. penetration, the France, the Spain. Right now, Haiti has been governed by 5 external countries over the last 2 or 3 years. When President Jean-Bertrand Aristide was president, that was a problem. Part of the problem, Kenyatta, is we live in a very competitive system. Can you imagine if Haiti and all these Caribbean islands got independence and freedom and was experiencing economic development and growth, much like Singapore, and Haiti has a lot of resources? It would threaten the wealth and the dominance of the dominant country in the region, which is the US. and by extension, Canada and the other countries. So it's not, that's one. Two, it's within the interest of, it was always within the interest. And when you reach, and when we start to talk about Walter Rodney, how Africa, how Europe underdeveloped Africa, Haiti and the Caribbean islands weren't supposed to rival these other countries. In fact, almost all Caribbean islands dealing with the issue of vulnerability in their growth and their development, and the issue of structural adjustment and debt. But part of this class will talk about Haiti and what's going on in the Caribbean, and we will get there. But yes, part of what has dogged Haiti was the issue of the US, Canada, and the European countries wanting to make an example out of Haiti and not want to inspire any more slave revolt, because okay, that's one thing. And of course, the second thing is that please remember there's Dominica Republic. Haiti, according to the story, Haiti had also helped to free the DR. But instead, the story that we're hearing is that they had invaded and colonized Haiti. And so there's been fierce battle between Haiti and Dominican Republic. That has also been part of the problem with Haiti. It's because the two countries don't get along. And over the last 50, 60, over 100 years, Haiti hasn't really, I question whether or not Haiti is really free and independent. Because they have been struggling to, and part of the, please remember that Haiti also have an elitist system, a social structure. And one of the point I will make when I talk about, when you read the book Neoliberalism, and when book 1 and the answer to the question, what's the Caribbean and who determines this, you will hear me say, well, I will make some pronouncements as it relates to the Caribbean, which I won't say. I don't want to give you the answer yet. So Haiti we will delve into, but part of Haiti's problem is what's going on externally, but what's also going on internally in the country in terms of corruption. But then part of that stems from colonization, the idea of theft. Okay, and we live in a world of theft, and we're going to talk about the issue of theft. So Kenyatta, we will delve into your question a little bit more, but part of Haiti's problem, of course, is the fact that they are a predominantly black country. Okay, their independence to earn.
So you're breaking up.
I mean, with that struggle, but also with penetration from external people. So they've had to deal with that as well. And corruption and infighting and the elites. And not only that, when these countries create a country, when we create countries for ourselves, as if we inherit the colonizers' ideologies, you create an elitist system that allow outside interference outside interference. Exactly what happened with Africa, where the Europeans came in, okay, and met with one group of African people, and then of course that's what started the downward spiral. If you look at what happened with in Grenada, Maurice Bishop and the CIA influence in Grenada, in Guyana as well. Walter Rodney was assassinated. There was always this drive to prevent global South countries from rising. And so there was always the influence of the CIA. There was always the influence from external people who also took advantage of the local situation or create JLP and PNP, because Jamaica could have been a Haiti. Jamaica could have devolved into the Haitian situation. But we did not. Yes, Fabian.
Yes, sir. when you touch on the issue of Haiti, and how the Americans and Europeans, North America in general and the Europeans, destabilized Haiti, because they didn't want that sort of competition from these smaller islands to their south.
Yeah.
I was just wondering, why is it that after independence of Jamaica and we were separated from Cayman, why they didn't touch Cayman? Is it because Cayman was still an overseas British colony? Because their economy and their dollar is predominantly stronger than the rest of us here in the Caribbean. So why didn't the American try to destabilize them?
Well, I mean, Cayman is a British sorry,
and that is the reason why they didn't touch them.
Yeah, Cayman is it's still a colony, right? And of course, there's an understanding between, I mean, the US, the UK, Germany, France. They are part of the United Nations, or the G8, or the leading countries in the world today. They represent Western civilization, okay? And of course, so there is an understanding between these countries. But Cayman is a colony of Britain, of course. So it's a different situation with Cayman, and the Caymanians do not want to get independence from Britain. They love the idea of being controlled by Britain. And I lived in Cayman Islands for a while. And some people said Cayman Islands, they are lazy, they don't like to work. They like the idea of that. But let's finish the video. Let's get back to the video quickly. I want to wrap this up because it's almost 9:18. I want to wrap this video up and play the beginning of another one, and then we'll have to wrap up. And none of what I wanted to do today we did, just so you know, which I wanted to talk about Frantz Fanon. Begin by looking at the Negro is not any more than the white man, what that means. I wanted to start talking. That's what I wanted to do today, but we won't get into that. That's fine. We had some issues earlier, so next week, this Wednesday we'll begin with that. But continue watching this particular video, which is an introduction to C.L.R. James's The Black Jacobins, and it's part 1. I won't play part 2, but this is an introduction to James's to C.L.R. James. Okay, let's continue. Pick up where we left off.
Historians long after The Black Jacobins was published in 1938. James' book was one of several works that inspired the field of subaltern or post-colonial studies. Here, historians from the branches of social inquiry, which deal with the various legacies of the colonial period, write history from the point of view of the subalterns being those groups that have been excluded from traditional power structures and opportunities, like slaves and peasants. James's approach, the subalterns being those groups that have been excluded from traditional power structures and opportunities, like slaves and peasants. James's approach to history, and indeed the whole of the subaltern school, cannot be understood without appreciating the works of Karl Marx, whose idea of history was shaped by the German philosopher Hegel's notion of the dialectic, a word that denotes the tension created between an idea or concept and the reactions that rise up in opposition to it. This antithesis eventually leads to a kind of synthesis, a fusion of the two ideas. Karl Marx built on this idea of the dialectic to develop his notion of historical materialism, where history is pushed forward by economic forces. The word materialism here should not be confused with its contemporary meaning, which is a focus on material possessions. Rather, Marx believed that the driving force of history was how the means of production, or the tools and resources used to produce goods and services, how those are owned and organized in any society. For example, in a capitalist society, most economic activity is in private hands, and businesses act in a way that promotes the profits and interests of their owners. As Marx wrote in the German Ideology, this mode of production must not be considered simply as being the production of the physical existence of the individuals. Rather, it is a definite form of activity of these individuals, a definite form of expressing their life, a definite mode of life on their part. As individuals express their life, so they are. He went on to write in the 18th Brumaire of Louis Bonaparte, men make their own history, but they do not make it as they please. They do not make it under self-selected circumstances, but under circumstances existing already, given and transmitted from the past. The tradition of all dead generals weighs like a nightmare on the brains of the living. So in other words, Marx believed that individuals tended to see the world according to their role within the means of production, as business owners, for example, or as wage earners. The interests of those often competing groups is what drives history according.
This is very important, Kenyatta, especially to the question you ask. Okay. It's very, very important. The means of production, who owns the means of production, who is supposed to, in the Western world, what pertains, what dominates, who controls. And we're going to answer some of your questions. I don't want to give away too much, but one of the things we're going to talk about is ghetto. Ghetto was the name for the Jewish quarter in 16th century Venice. Later, it came to mean any section of a city to which Jews were confined. America has contributed to the concept of the ghetto, the restriction of person to a special area and the limiting of their freedom of choice on the basis of skin color. The majority of the people I live in Haiti black. Okay. The 1800s, we are far removed from the 1800s, but yet we are not far removed from the 1800s. Okay. But the history of black people is since the transatlantic is a history that has been unfair and catastrophic and tragic to the black and brown man wherever you are. Frantz Fanon says that Frantz Fanon in his book Wretched of the Earth said the black man is a political creature in the global sense. No, wherever you go, there is no escape in the Western world. There is no escape. And we live, and then I said to you, we live in a world that is created. I said, life is what you make it or what you allow others to make of it for you. So I would talk about, say, for example, Frantz Fanon said the Negro is not any more than the white man. What is he talking about in Black Skin's White Mask? He's saying, and Frantz Fanon is a very important figure in post-colonial theory. Very important figure in post-colonialism. Very important figure. In fact, Frantz Fanon was a psychologist or someone or who promoted the psychoanalytic theory, but he was very important because he was able to combine colonialism with phenomenology. Phenomenology is the study of the mind, as the father of phenomenology was Descartes. The study of the mind. And Frantz Fanon, in his unique way, was able to diagnose the man. And not just the black man, although he was a revolutionary in the 1950s, he died in the 1960s, then his book was published and became popular after his death. But Frantz Fanon, very important figure, who helped to try to rescue and systematically analyze the man. He said the Negro is not full stop, any more than the white man. In other words, what is he saying? He's saying that the Negro is no different from the white man. The Negro is no different than the white man. The Negro is forced to be black or inferior. The white man is forced to be white or superior. Both are trapped. We call that entrapment. Both are trapped in a cycle, in a system, in a culture that has already determined or predetermined how he or she ought to behave, who is inferior and who. And later on, you're going to hear me talk about de jure and de facto factor of discrimination. Although discrimination is a thing of the past, we still have de jure and de facto factors of discrimination. One which is systematic and through systems and operations, and the other is not systematic. It's through attitude that is facilitated by a historical system.
Sir, hello, are you hearing me?
Go ahead.
But sir, we do have a few historical systems that still remain very prominent within our society, including our lawmakers, because, for example, it was during that time, in that US time, when they had a serious issue with the police force in the United States and other countries. For example, George Floyd. That's when I found out that the police forces, specifically in countries like the UK, in Jamaica, other Caribbean countries, Canada, were not put in place for law and order in a sense.
No,
it was put there. It was placed. The police force, including Jamaican police force as well.
Yes.
Initial objective was to hunt runaway slaves and to monitor Black persons who were deemed legal to move around within society with paperwork, of course. So that's when I found out that, so this is something that is coming from slavery, and they said yes. And for example, not necessarily not the Caribbean, but as we said before, Jamaica is a part of the Americas.
Yeah, but but even when you look at Adam Smith and you read his book Wealth of Nations, Adam Smith says that people became wealthy because they worked hard. Karl Marx said no. When when you start to study history, no, the serfs went on people's property and stole their land and turned around, took their land, and then the people and then hired back the serfs whose land they stole, and create a system to protect their ill-gotten gain, theft. Okay, to protect their theft. So you are continue.
And that is and then you said something else as well, as it relates to taking someone else's wealth and then protecting it.
Yes.
I've been privileged enough to sit in different policy meetings at high levels, and I remember the very first time I traveled and I sat in a policy meeting as it relates to securing funding for the Jamaica National Program, which is the national HIV/STI program within the Ministry of Health. Something I learned, and that was when, for example, I'm going to use the HIV/AIDS epidemic when it just hit. It's no longer a disease, really. They'll refer to it as more like a disability. But when they started recording cases in the United States, amongst Canada, Australia, and most French and speaking countries, started distributing money to low economic countries like Jamaica, Haiti, Barbados, and so forth, those countries.
Yeah.
Because they, other than wanting to, not in the first sense that they wanted to help, but in the sense that they wanted to protect their wealth. They didn't want persons to try to come to their country to seek medical care. And this was something I learned, that is how different funding agencies came about, like USAID, UN, and those different bodies, is really to monitor and protect developing countries' assets.
Well, and then that's good to know. Those are some of the things that when part of this course, when we finish this course and you look at the trajectory of this course, then we will, of course, that's part of the conversation. That's part of what we're going to be talking about and we may not go into policy, but of course, when you look at immigration and immigration policy towards Black and brown people is not favorable compared to immigration policy to people from Anglo-Saxon countries like Europe, especially in terms of what's going on in the US today, and around the world where it's especially in the US, it's saying that the majority will be part of the minority, and the minority will not become part of the majority. So as a result, immigration policy is draconian towards global South people, since it was already draconian, but since 2010, it's been more draconian because they have developed a policy to mitigate against the idea that Black and brown people will become part of the majority in the US and the Americas anytime between 2020 and 2025 or 2035. That's what we're hearing. And so over the past couple of years, policy towards Caribbean people have been very draconian compared to other parts of the world. So that's one of the things we're going to touch on when we start to look at immigration and what informs policy. Okay, and these ideas suggest. So all of this is very important to note. So thank you for that, Kenyatta. And those are some of the practical examples that we will cite and highlight as we delve into this course. We talk about the Negro is not any more than the white man. When we talk about the colonized, underdeveloped man, is a political creature in the global sense of the term. We will talk about what are we talking about? The Negro is no different from the white man. The Negro is forced to be black or inferior, while the white man is forced to be white. And so he talks about, and so I asked the question, what is the ultimate of all things? The ultimate of all things is that we live together as one with all of our individuality in this reality. A man once said, once you label me, you negate me. That's what Kierkegaard said. Once you label me, you negate me. The problem of lumping people into one is one of the things that he's referring to when he talks about the Negro is not any more than the white man, and trying to rescue the individual. Because the white man is born within a culture, within a norm that says he is more superior. And of course, one of the things when we start to look at the dark ghetto, and even within ghetto society or Black communities, you have those, even within the community, we create a system where some people continue to think in privileged terms. We have still inherited that colonial culture of better than the other, which helps to perpetuate and to continue discrimination in the world today. And so we need to think about that. But the Negro is no different from the white man. It's a very important term in the sense that the Negro is forced to be black. What if the Negro wants to be white or thinks of himself superior? He should be allowed to think of himself superior, but he is not allowed to think of himself superior because he's black. And so that's what Frantz Fanon is getting at when he talks about the Negro is no different from the white man. The Negro is forced to be black. Okay, so he talks about so what he does is he tries to rescue the individual, and we have to, and so he psychoanalyzes the individual outside of any community, outside of any culture, in order to rescue him. That's according to Frantz Fanon. We'll get into that some more. But let me let me just finish. Let's continue with this very important assessment by C.L.R. James.
According to Marx. Antonio Gramsci extended Marx's theory to the discussion of culture, and in doing so laid the groundwork for subaltern history, or history from below. Put simply, Gramsci developed a theory of cultural hegemony, stating that the dominant social class, for example the bourgeoisie or the business owners, not only had a big influence over the economy, but they had a big influence over a society's culture as well. Gramsci believed.
Kenyatta, I hope that also this point is also helping you to think about Haiti. Okay. Not okay. When we can't think about, many people say, oh, Jamaica is not we don't have the issue of race in Jamaica. That's not no. But macroscopically, if you think about the world and how the world is ordered, okay, and who live where, and what industries those people in the Caribbean are supposed to be doing. Okay, the people in the if economic development there are stages to development, or is in a pendulum, the Caribbean industry is tourism, or it's bauxite, but not bauxite per se. We only have the technology, the techniques, and our development is in such a way that prevents us from doing the finish. In other words, we can extrude the bauxite, but we can't turn it into aluminium. Okay. No, so that's given to the global north. And can I tell? And then the society makes value and determinations what jobs are important, and then only expose certain peoples and certain places to certain jobs that provide certain level of compensation. One of my friends said to me some time ago, I wanted to do a particular study, but when I went to college, because I didn't do this thing in high school, I couldn't do it. Because his school, the black area, they don't expose them to a certain education that allows them to do certain computer classes in college. So now he has to go do case management. And I say to you, Caribbean people must be wary of this investment in tourism and certain kind of jobs, or certain kind of, as if this is the only job Caribbean people and black people could do. And it's not just a Caribbean thing, it's the black position everywhere, where the black space. The Caribbean, predominantly black and brown people, the black and brown space. Okay, Africa, the black space. The dark ghetto or the hood, the black space. And the black space, they're almost all similar. And we talk about how society, the bourgeoisie, the dominant class in the world, the dominant worldview, the dominant class, the dominant countries, and how the world is ordered a particular way. Say, for example, in 1944, after World War II ended and all the most powerful countries came together, Jamaica and the Caribbean wasn't there. It was the only 6 or 7 of a couple of most powerful countries were there, representing their own interests. One of the ideas put forward at that world meeting was to reorder the world in a particular way. There was no presence, there was no European presence or Western presence in the Middle East. So the justification was to establish a presence in the Middle East. But they did not want they just finished with World War II. So they could not fear invading Palestine or Gaza and disrupting and displacing people, much like what Russia was doing. So instead, what did the Western world call it? What did these powerful countries call it? They call it, they're going back to reclaim their land. They say, okay, actually, so they created with a system, the Jews could now go back to Israel now. Not the Jews that live in Palestine, because there were Jews there. The Jews in Europe, the 10th generation and the 50th generation mix up and blender, they still were clean. Okay, they found the Jews went back. Okay, said, okay, actually, so the Jews the Jews in Europe decided that they would go back to Palestine and take land that's theirs. Now, the Palestinians don't have nation states like the way we have them. They are peoples, but they don't believe in like an border. They have open borders, so to speak. The Israelis, and with the help of their powerful European friends, went back to Israel and formulated a country again, and they justified their their occupation, using biblical history and heritage. And that's why I say one of the importance of that's why doing history is important, so that you can, because it helps with claim. So the Israelite, they were able to now justify their occupation as not an occupation or theft, but on something biblical, pointing to something biblical. Quite interesting. Let's finish the story. Let's finish listening about what Gramsci said here. And by the way, so Emmanuel Gramsci wrote the book, The Prison Notebook. And he eschewed intellectualism. He believed that the intellectualism that we have today is an intellectualism that is created by a system that continues privilege and the status quo. But he is against intellectualism. Just like Michel Foucault believes that the issue of knowledge is created to institutions are created to preserve a particular knowledge that continues the status quo or the privilege.
That the creation of an alternative or proletarian culture, that is a culture of the workers promoting revolutionary ideas, that these were necessary for the overthrow of capitalism and the rise of the communist state. So to some extent, this is also the goal of subaltern studies, of which the Black Jacobins plays a very early part. Subaltern studies represent the history of groups excluded from the dominant culture. While James was strongly influenced by a Marxist approach to history, the Black Jacobins is not rooted in any particular academic school or debate. Rather, it emerged from the tense political environment of the late 1930s. C.L.R. James was a keen observer of both political events and cultural developments, and there is some evidence that the author was inspired by his immediate surroundings in London while he was writing The Black Jacobins. In The Black Jacobins, C.L.R. James asks a central question: how did a group of uneducated slaves in what is today Haiti successfully overthrow their colonial masters and defeat the invasions that followed from France, from Britain, and from Spain? As the only successful slave revolt in history.
Let's go back again, because you see how many times Haiti was enslaved. Had to deal with colonization.
As the only success and defeat the invasions that followed from France, from Britain, and from Spain.
France, Britain, and Spain, that's how many invasions they had to suffer. And can I tell you, they are still dealing with external manipulation. And
as the only successful slave revolt in history, the events in Saint-Domingue warrant attention. As an historian, James' aim is to describe the slave revolt from the point of view of the revolutionaries and their leader, Toussaint Louverture. Throughout James's historical investigations, he is asking another question as well. What is the nature of revolution? And what are the conditions in which the proletariat, or the workers, can overthrow those responsible for their oppression? Although James does not explicitly frame his discussion in these terms, his political viewpoint informs his discussion of history. James's Marxist beliefs also place the book squarely in the heart of the political conflicts of the late 1930s. As he writes, the violent conflicts of our age enable our practiced vision to see into the very bones of previous revolutions more easily than heretofore. He refers to the violent upheavals going on across Europe at the time, the eve of World War II. He notes the revolts held by the fascist leader in Spain when he writes of Franco's heavy artillery, and refers to the mass repression in the Soviet Union when he writes of the rattle of Stalin's firing squads. Such is our age, and this book is of it, with something of the fever then and the fret. He writes in the Black Jacobins, "The writer has sought not only to analyze, but to demonstrate in their movement the economic forces of the age, their molding of society and politics, of men in the mass and individual men, the powerful reaction of these on their environment at one of those rare moments when society is at boiling point and therefore fluid." As a work of history, the Black Jacobins builds upon previous works on the revolution in Saint-Domingue and the conditions there more generally, much of it published in French. These works include scholarly histories, first-person accounts, official archives, and travel books. James provides an annotated bibliography of these works in the book, in which he writes, "Despite the importance and interest of the subject, it was for long difficult to find in English or French a comprehensive treatment of the Saint-Domingue Revolution. Both in insight and objectivity, the Haitian writers are easily the best." James draws on a long list of sources, notably Colonel Henri de Poyon Belize, and his history of 1899, Histoire militaire de la Révolution de Saint-Domingue, or a military history of the Revolution of San Domingo. James writes of this book, "This is the official French account. Poyon misunderstands the whole campaign, both the offensive plan of Leclerc and the defensive plan of Toussaint. There is no limit to the brazenness of these imperialist historians." Despite disagreeing with Poyon's version of history, James finds the historian to be a careful scholarly writer and is able to build on Poyon's work. This is a theme in James's work. Though he frequently disagrees with the work of scholars who went before him, he finds that he can use their work in his own. In an important way, James's history of the Haitian Revolution builds on the work of the scholars of another revolt that started barely 2 years earlier, the French Revolution. As he notes in the Black Jacobins, it is impossible to understand the Saint-Domingue Revolution unless it is studied in close relationship with the revolution in France. Fortunately, the French Historical School of the French Revolution is one of the greatest historical schools of Western civilization. James lists in the book several French historians who inspired his own study of the Haitian Revolution. They expose the economic foundations of the French Revolution. They wrote about the personalities of the main actors and covered the politics of the period. James credits these influences in the book on the Haitian Revolution. I have sought all through to show the direct influence of the French Revolution on events and leading personalities in Saint-Domingue. It appears from James's biography that the awareness of and interest in this history was sparked when he moved to Europe in the 1930s. In that sense, the intellectual basis of the work is James's attempt to unify his understanding of West Indian culture, that is, the culture of the islands of the Caribbean Sea, and history with the debates over history and politics going on at the time in England and France. So in other words, James was very much influenced by historians of the French Revolution when he wrote The Black Jacobins. This is the Elizabeth Glasgow.
Just an introduction to C.L.R. James talking about the perspective of the book, how the book is written. When you do book review, this is how you would want to do a book review. If you read a book and you want to, that this is how the way how the presentation was done was very good. Any quick question? What time? It's 9. Okay, we don't have time. So I don't have question, but I will pick up from where we left off here. There's some things I want to get into. I want to answer the question about I want to finally get into what is Caribbean and who determined it. I have a lecture prepared for that, a presentation for you guys to prepare. But I also want to talk about the idea of the Negro is not any more than the white man. Because Frantz Fanon, is here talking about the post-colonial prerogative. And what he's doing really is interrogating identity. To read Fanon is to experience the sense of division that prefigures and fissures the emergence of a truly radical thought that never dawns without casting an uncertain dark in Fanon. Fanon is a very important figure, and actually his book, The Wretched of the Earth, is a book that's a recommended reading and that's supposed to be on your syllabus. When you read Fanon, you are going to be revolutionized. A very good writer. He writes with a lot of passion, skepticism, with an anger. Okay. Fanon's two most influential texts, Black Skin, White Masks, and The Wretched of the Earth, evoke the concrete and contrasting worlds of colonial racism as experienced in metropolitan France in the 1950s and during the anti-colonial Algerian War of Liberation a decade later. And his work has been lost in time. But there is this impassioned plea that the third world, or the global south, but in the 1960s, he said third world, the third world must start over a new history of man. We will begin from there. The third world must begin a new history of man. And the post-colonial, the colonial underdeveloped man is a political creature in the most global sense of the term. What are we talking about? We will begin from there at the next class, and then delve into the question that I have, the notes I have for you guys. Any questions so far before we wrap up class today? Okay. But if you guys have questions about the I asked, there's some I had sent in I didn't send the email, but the question is on the online, British online module for Caribbean Thought. If you guys haven't got that as yet, let me know. But if you guys want me to email it, I guess I'll have to email it. But we meet on Wednesday. Class promises to be very deep and meaty. Oh, I was supposed to play one more video, but I forgot. But I'll play it for the next class. But class promises to be very meaty. In fact, since we have 96 minutes, I can actually play the video. It's a very interesting video that introduces you to the concepts of this course. I'll bring it up right now. Is this it? I think this is it. Here we go. 13 minutes. Oh, here we go. Severy, this is
had Renee Mara, who won the pre.
You're gonna enjoy this. This is only for 46 minutes, but I'll only play it for 5 minutes. Okay. And then we'll wrap up. And next class we will begin where I really wanted to start this week. Right, I share the video here. Share screen. This is C.L.R. James in an interview recently. I mean, not recently, sometime ago.
Praising God, inquired urgently for gold. The native Indians were peaceable and after Christopher Columbus landed first in the New World at the island of San Salvador, and after praising God, inquired urgently for gold. The natives, Red Indians, were peaceable and friendly and directed him to Haiti, a large island. Rich, they said, in the Yellow Metal. He sailed to Haiti. One of his ships.
Are you guys hearing the sound clearly? Yes? Are you guys hearing the sound clearly?
Yes, sir.
No, sir.
No? I'm sharing the screen and I click, let me make sure I click on share sound. Share sound. Let me know.
Being wrecked, the Haitian Indians helped him so willingly that very little was lost, and of the articles which they brought on shore, not one was stolen.
You guys hear that just now?
Yes, sir. I did.
This the most advanced Europe and directed him to Haiti, a large island nearly. Christopher Columbus landed first in the New World at the island of San Salvador, and after praising God, inquired urgently for gold. The natives, Red Indians, were peaceable and friendly and directed him to Haiti, a large island, nearly as large as Ireland, rich, they said, in the yellow metal. He sailed to Haiti. One of his ships being wrecked, the Haitian Indians helped him so willingly that very little was lost, and of the articles which they brought on shore, not one was stolen. The Spaniards, the most advanced Europeans of their day, annexed the island, called it Hispaniola, and took the backward natives under their protection. They introduced Christianity, forced labor in mines, murder, rape, bloodhounds, strange diseases, and artificial famine by the destruction of cultivation to starve the rebellious. These and other requirements of the higher civilization reduced the native population from an estimated 500,000, perhaps 1 million, to 60,000 in 15 years.
And thus it is that Dr. C.L.R. James, a very distinguished scholar, reads the first 2 paragraphs of his prologue, a remarkable book, a classic, The Black Jacobins, which deals with the Toussaint Louverture-led Black Slave Rebellion in San Domingo 2 years after the French Revolution. In these 2 paragraphs, Dr. James, your style of writing, of course, is a very salubrious one indeed, but the bite, the irony, and the truth, you might say, of white man and all these years of Western civilization, so-called. In these 2 paragraphs, you've almost essentialized it.
Yes, I think so, and I wrote it quite naturally. I didn't have to search, but I'm a West Indian, and we in the West Indies are very much aware of the contrast between what the white man says and what he does, because we are Western civilized in our orientation, so we are aware of all the things he's saying, much more than people who speak a different language or live a different type of civilization.
This very point you make, which you point out, Professor James is now visiting professor at the Northwestern University. The fact that you're West Indian, this has always been a fascinating historical point, isn't it? We think among the leaders and the whole black liberation movement through the years have been West Indians.
Yes, we have had a whole lot of them. We have had Marcus Garvey. We have had Aimé Césaire, the poet, with that magnificent poem on Africa in which he stated the question of negritude. We have had René Marin, who won the Prix Goncourt with the book Batouala on Africa. We have had George Padmore, Marcus Garvey, as I said, and we have had, there's no doubt about it, that Malcolm X's mother was a West Indian, and that had something to do with it, and Stokely Carmichael was born and grew up there as a boy. I also took some part. I believe it is something that is worthwhile, and I know and feel myself as a West Indian as Padmore was.
It's as though two cultures are fused, in a sense.
Yes, we are not admitted completely into the Western culture, but we have all the possibilities of developing it. So on being kept back at home, we went abroad and made the best use of both the opportunities of education and the impulse towards freedom, which we felt in the islands. That is the reason why the West Indians have done so well. And I would like to add this, that Fidel Castro and the Cubans are not all black people. Fidel isn't black at all. But the attitude of the revolution and what they are doing is essentially a West Indian revolution, similar to what Toussaint Louverture did.
Yes, so we come, in fact, you have an appendix to your book, an epilogue. You wrote the book in 1938, how remarkably prescient and prophetic Professor James' book is. because he dealt with the nature of Africa and the possible independence movements back then. But the epilogue is from Toussaint Louverture to Castro. Now, Toussaint Louverture, and it's imperative, of course, that white people know this. More blacks do, well, we know that younger blacks are aware of this. I had difficulty finding this book, by the way, in white bookstores. I found it at the Ellis Bookshop on South Cottage, which is significant in itself, I think.
I think the book now is being sold and read everywhere.
Yes.
I think the movement on the whole, it is being read and studied in universities predominantly white in the United States. That is a fact. Although it's the black movement that has given it the great impetus.
Perhaps we should dwell upon the nature of this book, and it's a terribly important one. It's the Black Jacobins, the subtitle, Toussaint Louverture and the San Domingo Revolution. Now, here you describe a scene. The Spaniards came, the French, the British. They found a great deal of profit to be made in the West Indies, San Domingo, and Haiti. And
it was the wealthiest colony in the world at the time, not only in the West Indies.
And so, but it could only be done. You describe, of course, the slave trade and the nature of the slave ships and the incredible brutishness. So the question is, how could a people, the black people in this case, the Africans, and this, I'll ask you about the mulattoes in a moment, the Creoles, how could they survive is the question. This is the key.
The question is this. Number one, they were a people, obviously, who had basically a very fine physique. Otherwise, they would have been wiped away by the sheer objective circumstances of the Middle Passage and their lives. They had a fine physique, and secondly, which is a most important point, they obviously were a highly civilized people. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to be integrated into the sugar production in the way that they were and learn as rapidly as they did the language and all the techniques of Western civilization. They were civilized people in Africa, and today people are more and more recognizing that even when they were slaves in Africa, they were slaves of a certain organized society. That is what must be remembered about the West Indian. And he was more fortunate than he was in the United States because the islands were small, immensely concentrated. The sugar plantation had many of them living together, so they were closely connected. And this backbone of civilization in Africa and African physical strength, and then having to learn the elements of Western civilization, made them what they did and what they have become.
So we come to several points that Dr. James raises, and again, the question of
Not hearing you, sir.
Not hearing you, sir. You're muted.
I was just checking. I know you weren't hearing me. I'm just messing. I thought you were hearing me, but thank you. That was a very important 7 minutes. He made two very important points as it relates to the kind of slaves that came to the Caribbean, which spoke to the kind of civilization that was in Africa. Remember, when you read Arawaks to African, you read the period and what Europeans write in our culture about African, they were backward, they were uncivilized. But now we are, because of critical thinking, which is thinking about thinking and thinking what was previously thought, we're learning that is not true. Remember, we talk about history being a result of circumstances and human nature, but also when you read the book, when you read African sociology towards a critical perspective, history is neither mere action nor vertiginous or vertiginous freedom. Vertiginous is high or steep. Okay, vertiginous. History is neither mere action nor vertiginous freedom nor frivolous creativity. But it is the persistent attempt to do the best we can with the knowledge of the moment. It is human beings who make sense of history. based on their human natures and their circumstances. If we are told that truth lies in the poor, it simply means that the falsity of society lies in its oppression, which, however, it is masked by idealism and argumentation. Very important. History is neither mere action, nor steep freedom, nor frivolous creativity. It is the persistent attempt to do the best we can. It is men that make sense of history, of the present. It is men who make sense. And as I said, history is a result of human natures and circumstances. Human beings that have ego. Part of colonization, according to Frantz Fanon, is the depersonalization of humanity. It is the stripping away of one's individuality so as for control. Because when you start this, that's how control happened. But now, so what we are learning about Africa and the Africans who came to the Americas, it's quite interesting. One of the ways you study the African society and the Africans who came here, the African society is by studying the Africans who came here. And the Africans who came here, very important quality. I'm going to ask you this in the exam. 2 very important quality, which helps us to rethink the ideas about Africa being backward, made up of cannibals, without religion, without any kind of sophistication. First of all, if the Africans never had sophistication and were that backward, why are they being utilized to develop a market? They were very sophisticated and they were of fine physique. Quite interesting. We're going to stop here. We'll stop it. We'll pick it up next week as we continue to unpack and to go get deeper into some. I want to remind you, one of the persons we're going to have to look at the next week is Jean-Paul Sartre, because Jean-Paul Sartre, he helped to influence people like Frantz Fanon, C.L.R. James. And Jean-Paul Sartre, he was a philosopher from the 1905 to 1980s. And he focused on the construction of a philosophy of existence known as existentialism. And one of the things that he developed was classic phenomenology and the concept of the self and an interest in ethics. And these points to the divergence that are cornerstones of Sartre's existential phenomenology, which is very important to, and they were friends. Frantz Fanon was friend with Sartre. But the main features of his ontology, the study of being, are the groundlessness and radical freedom which characterize the human condition. Very important. We're going to talk a little bit about that, this existentialism, the individual. But of course, this is quite important. But I'm not making a case for liberalism, just so you know. All right, I'm talking about the problem of culture, okay? And how that same problem of culture is also part of what has come to create the colonial experience. Although we are moving away from that. That is and one more point I wanted to make. Avril, I did see your hand, but I wanted to say something real quick before you guys start to bolt out of class. If I could find it I can't find it. My notes. Where's my notes? Can't find it, but I had closed out everything. But if I could find it, where is it? Sorry, Avril, you had your hand up?
Yes, sir. I am not sure. I just wanted to know, even though I don't want to be long because I realize it's 9:11.
Yes.
But I know that you had a slide up with the nigger is not any more than the white man.
Yes.
You're gonna come with that next week?
That's what today I was supposed to give you the lecture on, but I didn't do it.
Oh, because I was wondering.
I was doing something completely. I would do that slide next week, and then no, as I said, I have notes prepared for the class, but because the sound wasn't working well, I decided, and I did not want you guys to miss this note, I miss the information that we have for you today. I decided to change it a little bit and spend more time with you in your groups and do some more introductory stuff. But next week, I will start from that. The Negro is not any more than the white man, and go into dark ghetto, homie Baba, so on and so forth. Okay?
Okay.
But
Okay, sir.
just
Thank
one
you so
point I
much.
want to make, post-colonial theory is just I want to define post-colonialism or post-colonial theory. Post-colonial theory is a body of thought that explores the impact of colonialism on the world. The impact is a body of thought. Okay, a body of thought that explores the impact of colonialism. And so part of it involves exploring the dominant ways of thinking about the relations between Western and non-Western people. That's part of colonialism. But another important thing about colonialism is that it is a critical academic study of cultural, political, and economic legacy of colonialism and imperialism, focusing on the impact of human control and exploitation of colonized people and their lands. Again, it's a critical academic study of the cultural, political, and economic legacy of colonialism and imperialism, focusing on the impact of, here we go again, control. Human control. That is what Frantz Fanon talks about, the issue of control, because colonization is about control. It is the depersonalization of the man. If the stripping away of anything of the individual, okay, it is to control. You first want to redefine a thing other than what it is. So now part of Frantz Fanon work now is to recapture the man by moving away from the language that demeans him and takes him outside of his world. That's why he said the Negro is not any more than the white man. But it's more than just that. It's more than just that. What post-colonialism does is important. Post-colonialism is the period or state of affairs after Western colonialism and the projects to do what? To reclaim and rethink the history and the agency of subordinated people. That is the best understanding of post-colonialism, I would tell you. If you were to give a definition of post-colonialism or post-colonial theory, it is a post-colonialism. Post-colonialism is the period or state of affairs after Western colonialism and the project to reclaim. One of the things that post-colonial theory does, okay, it explores ways in which the post-independent creature, men and women, how they have carved out a history for themselves, which to reclaim and to rethink the history and agency of our people. Say, for example, Dana price for a pound of flesh is part of critical thinking that rethinks the ways in which slaves have resisted. Rethink ideas about our identity, about religion. Say, for example, the issue about Obia. In this class, we will talk about Obia. We will talk about voodoo and African traditions. Okay, and please remember, part of this discrimination is to exclude our religion, is to exclude our practices. Nothing black, no good, you know. And we have inherited that tradition. This class will be very challenging, and I am giving it to you piece by piece, and I'm being very careful, but we will make certain pronouncements, and you have to be ready for it, because, okay, this is a critical class, which is very critical of certain perspectives that has come to demean us as a people. Okay, that's about it. We'll stop right here. All right, guys. But come Wednesday for a 2-hour non-stop lecture. Okay, 2 hours. So I'm happy I didn't do the lecture because I need at least 2 hours with no break to present, maybe 5 minutes break. But I have a big material prepared for you guys. So hopefully everything works, and I'm gonna make sure that I have nothing running in the background. I think that was part of the problem. I have a lot of stuff added to my machine that I'm working on, which is probably creating the noise in the background. Thank you guys. And I appreciate the questions. I appreciate the comments. Very good. The perspectives are very good so far. I appreciate them, and continue to share your thoughts and your ideas. May God bless you and keep you, cause His face to shine upon you, and give you an open mind, and help us to continue to work hard to make this world a better place, and to create generational wealth for our people and our peoples and our children and grandchildren. These are the mercies we ask. Amen. All right, guys, take care and have a great night and an amazing rest. Be easy.
Thank you, sir. Same to you.
Yeah, man.